The journey home. Few ideas resonate more profoundly within the human experience than the longing for a place to which we belong. Home. The very word carries a depth that far exceeds its simplicity. It signifies not only shelter but identity, connection, and meaning. For millennia, across civilizations and continents, the story of returning home has captured our shared imagination. In it, we see reflections of our own longings, our struggles against the forces that keep us wandering and adrift. When Odysseus departed from the smouldering ruins of Troy, he believed his voyage home would last only a few weeks. Instead, it consumed 10 years of his life, 10 years of gods and monsters, temptation and loss, hardship and revelation. Why does his story continue to resonate so powerfully more than 3,000 years after it was first told? Perhaps because we recognize something of ourselves in Odysseus, the part that yearns for home yet is drawn toward adventure, the part that wrestles between duty and desire, and the part that must confront both outer trials and inner turmoil on the path toward wholeness. Even in our modern world, we find his echoes everywhere. In the soldier returning from war forever transformed by what they have witnessed. In the refugee crossing perilous seas in search of safety. In the wanderer seeking to rediscover who they truly are. The hero's journey at its core is a path of transformation. We depart as one person and return as another, shaped by what we have endured, what we have lost, and what we have learned. This epic is not merely an ancient tale of adventure. It is a mirror of human existence itself. To truly understand this timeless work, we must first examine the world that gave rise to it, a world already ancient by the time of Homer. The events are set around 1200 BCE, during the twilight of what we now call the Bronze Age. It was a complex and prosperous world. Palaces flourished, trade networks linked distant lands, and writing systems supported royal administrations. City-states rose along the coasts, their power secured by ships that commanded the sea. Yet this sophisticated order was on the brink of collapse. Between roughly 1200 and 1150 BCE, civilizations across the eastern Mediterranean suffered a catastrophic disintegration. Great cities were destroyed, empires fell, writing systems disappeared, and trade networks crumbled. The causes remain debated, perhaps climate change, earthquakes, invasions, internal revolts, or a convergence of all these forces. What is certain is that a complex international system gave way to centuries of decline, a period scholars call the Greek Dark Age. It was within this Dark Age that the legends of the Trojan War and its aftermath survived through oral tradition passed down by generations of storytellers. When these epics were finally committed to writing, likely in the 8th century BCE, they preserved memories of a lost golden age filtered through centuries of spoken retelling. This gives the Odyssey a fascinating dual perspective. It is set in the heroic world of the Bronze Age, but composed in the emerging world of literacy, city-states, and colonization. Archaeologists have long debated how much historical truth lies behind Homer's poetry. Heinrich Schliemann's discovery of Troy in the 1870s demonstrated that the city itself was not a mere legend. Excavations at Mycenae, Pylos, and Ithaca revealed palatial complexes similar to those described in the epics. Yet Homer's work is not history, it is something deeper. It is cultural memory transfigured into art, blending myth and reality, divine and human, the fantastical and the profoundly real. Sing to me, O muse of the man of many devices. With these words begins one of humanity's greatest literary achievements, and yet the identity of the person who composed them remains one of literature's most enduring mysteries. Who was Homer? Was he a singular poetic genius, or a collective name for generations of bards? Could he even have been a woman, as some scholars suggest? We may never know. Ancient tradition describes Homer as a blind poet from Ionia, in what is now Western Turkey. 7 cities claim to be his birthplace. His name may even derive from a term meaning hostage or one who follows. Whatever the truth, Homer stands as the culmination of an oral poetic tradition of extraordinary sophistication, one capable of producing and transmitting works of astonishing complexity without writing.
How was this possible?
Homeric poetry relied on what scholars term formulaic composition. Rather than memorizing fixed texts, poets mastered a vast repertoire of metrical phrases, repeated scenes, and narrative patterns that could be combined and reassembled during live performance. These poets, known as auaidoi or singers, were oral composers, recreating the epic anew each time they performed while preserving its essential structure and spirit. They were the living archives of their civilization, safeguarding not only stories, but moral codes, history, and collective identity. Sometime in the 8th century BCE, the revolutionary invention of alphabetic writing allowed these oral compositions to be fixed in written form. Whether this occurred under the patronage of a ruler like Pisistratus of Athens, as some traditions hold, or through a more organic process, the result changed human culture forever. The text we read today still bears the marks of its oral origin. Repeated phrases such as wine-dark sea and grey-eyed Athena, recurring scenes that follow familiar patterns, and narrative devices designed to aid memory and rhythm. Yet, it also reveals a unity of artistic vision that suggests the hand of a master poet, or perhaps a small circle of them. The Odyssey is far more than a simple adventure. Its architecture is as intricate as its hero, employing narrative techniques that would influence storytelling for thousands of years. One of the most striking is Homer's decision to begin in medias res in the middle of the story.
Rather than opening with Odysseus' departure from Troy, we first encounter him in his 7th year of captivity on Calypso's island.
His earlier adventures, the Cyclops, the Sirens, Scylla and Charybdis, are later recounted by Odysseus himself to the Phaeacians. This creates a complex narrative structure in which the poem's 24 books cover only about 40 days of present time, while encompassing a decade of past events through memory and retelling. It is an architecture of extraordinary sophistication, one that feels strikingly modern. The poem also employs what scholars call ring composition, a design in which themes and motifs appear, then return in reverse order, forming a symmetrical whole. It begins and ends with assemblies of the gods. Telemachus's quest to discover news of his father mirrors Odysseus's own journey home. The hospitality Telemachus receives from Nestor and Menelaus contrasts with the violation of hospitality by the suitors in Ithaca. These patterns are not merely decorative, they create deliberate contrasts that enrich the poem's exploration of morality, identity, and order. The language itself reflects this precision. Composed in dactylic hexameter, 6 metrical feet per line, each with one long syllable followed by 2 short, the Greek text possesses a rhythmic power that aided both artistry and memory. This meter became synonymous with epic poetry throughout the Western world. When we compare the Odyssey with its companion epic, the Iliad, the contrast is revealing. While the Iliad centers on wrath, honor, and death within the confines of the Trojan battlefield, the Odyssey explores a far wider landscape, both geographical and emotional. It is not a poem of martial glory, but of endurance. Not about dying nobly, but about living wisely. Not about conquering others, but about mastering oneself. At the heart of this sweeping narrative stands its hero, a figure unlike any who came before. Odysseus represents a new kind of ideal, one defined not by physical might, but by intellect and adaptability. In the Iliad, he is a capable yet secondary figure, respected, but overshadowed by warriors like Achilles and Ajax. His true moment begins after Troy's fall, when he conceives the Trojan horse, the stratagem that ends a decade of stalemate. This triumph of cunning over strength defines him. His very name, derived from the Greek Odyssomai, meaning to be wrathful against or to cause pain, carries undertones of conflict and resourcefulness. Homer reinforces this identity through recurring epithets, Polytropos, the man of many turns, Polymetis of many wiles, and Politlas, much enduring. These qualities, intelligence, patience, resilience, become the measure of heroism in a changed world. This shift reflects a transformation in cultural values. In the unstable age that followed Troy's destruction, survival required not brute force but flexibility, reason, and the ability to navigate both human and divine challenges. Odysseus is the embodiment of that adaptability, a hero for an uncertain age. Yet his greatest strength is also his downfall. His intelligence gives rise to pride, most fatally in the episode of the Cyclops, when he cannot resist revealing his true name to the blinded Polyphemus. That act of arrogance provokes Poseidon's wrath, condemning him and his men to years of hardship. Within Odysseus lies a duality that makes him profoundly human. He is both the loyal husband who rejects immortality for Penelope's sake, and the wanderer who lingers for years in the arms of other women. He is both the devoted father who weeps at the sight of his son, and the reckless commander whose pride destroys his crew. He is both the storyteller who captivates the Phaeacians and the deceiver who manipulates friend and foe alike. But the value of his journey extends beyond mere knowledge. Through his travels, Telemachus gains insight into his own situation back home. He witnesses well-functioning royal households, observes marriages unlike the suspended state of his parents' union, and sees firsthand how legitimate kingship operates. Most importantly, he begins to develop traits reminiscent of his father. He exercises discretion when he withholds information about the suitors from Nitor, demonstrates diplomatic tact in the presence of Helen, and employs strategic thinking as he plans his return journey to avoid ambush. Telemachus's education is not merely the quest to find news of Odysseus. It is the shaping of a man capable of standing alongside his father, or even in his place if circumstances demand. Through interactions with his father's peers, Telemachus steps into the heroic social sphere, no longer confined to the increasingly compromised and feminized space of his father's palace. While he is away, the suitors discover his absence. Enraged by his independence and fearful that he may return with news or allies threatening their position, they plot an ambush intending to murder him at sea. This escalation illustrates how even a symbolic assertion of authority appears threatening to those who wield none, and how Telemachus has grown from an inconsequential figure to one deemed worth eliminating. The parallel journeys of father and son, both navigating treacherous waters toward home, create one of the poem's most compelling symmetries. Though traveling separately, their paths are destined to converge, two halves of a legacy seeking reunion. While Telemachus sails the wine-dark sea in search of his father, Penelope navigates equally perilous currents at the palace. Her situation exemplifies the constrained agency of women in the ancient world. For nearly 20 years, she has maintained an impossible position, neither wife nor widow. With no confirmation of Odysseus's death, remarriage would be dishonorable. Yet with her husband absent, and Telemachus too young to assume authority, she lacks the male protection that secures a woman's social standing. This vulnerability exposes her to pressures from the suitors, her own family, and Ithacan society. Her response displays intelligence equal to her husband's, though expressed in different domains. Where Odysseus relies on tactical deceptions in the field, Penelope employs strategic delays at home. Her most famous stratagem is the shroud ruse. Promising to select a new husband once she completes a funeral shroud for her father-in-law, Laertes, she weaves diligently by day, only to unravel her work each night. For 3 years, this deception holds the suitors at bay until a disloyal servant exposes the trick. This act is more than a delaying tactic. It is profoundly symbolic. Weaving traditionally defines female virtue in Greek culture. By undoing her own work, Penelope simultaneously fulfills and subverts these expectations, appearing industrious while covertly resisting societal pressure. Her intelligence manifests further in her management of the suitors. She placates them with courtesy and appearances while never yielding to their central demand, extracting gifts and material advantage in the process. Her relationship with Timicus adds another layer of complexity. She has raised him alone, protecting him from the suitor's predations, yet must now navigate his emerging independence. Tensions arise, such as when he commands her back to her quarters during his first assertion of authority, reflecting the uneasy transition as he claims the male role she partially occupied. Penelope's world is rich with dreams and omens, signaling connections to subconscious or divine knowledge. She dreams of her husband, of her brother-in-law dwelling in Hades, and of an eagle slaughtering geese that represent the suitors. These visions offer both solace and uncertainty, hinting at truths beyond her comprehension. When news arrives of Timicus's journey and the suitor's murderous plot, her distress exposes her emotional vulnerability beneath a calculated exterior. Despite her resourcefulness, she remains a woman whose family teeters between absence and death. Her central position in the household provides a unique vantage point. She observes which servants remain loyal and which have been corrupted by the suitors. She maintains trusted relationships, particularly with her faithful attendant Ithaca, who once cared for both Odysseus and Timicus. Through these domestic networks, she retains some authority within a progressively hostile home. Unlike Helen in Sparta, who drugs her guests' wine to ease painful memories, Penelope preserves grief as loyalty. Her tears and solitude maintain Odysseus's presence in absence. By refusing to move forward, she leaves space for his return. This steadfastness elevates Penelope to an archetype of marital fidelity. Yet Homer presents a nuanced portrait. Her fidelity is active, strategic, and self-directed rather than passive or merely emotional. She remains loyal to her husband, but also to her own judgment, exercising agency instead of succumbing to external pressures. When the disguised Odysseus finally encounters her, their interaction becomes a delicate dance of revelation and concealment, testing and being tested. The mutual caution of equals aware of the stakes underscores their compatibility and amplifies the emotional resonance of their eventual reunion. Beyond Timicus and Penelope, the broader household constitutes the foundational social and economic unit of ancient Greek life. The Ithacan crisis extends beyond family drama, unraveling the entire social ecosystem. The royal household encompasses not just immediate family, but concentric circles of servants, slaves, herders, and workers, all intertwined with the fortunes of the ruling family. In Odysseus's absence, this structure has become distorted. The royal household, typically a center of economic and social order, redistributes resources via feasts, gifts, and patronage. Under Odysseus, goods flowed from outlying farms and herds to the center, properly allocated by status and need. Guests were received according to rank, servants rewarded for loyalty. The suitors pervert this order. Arriving uninvited, they demand treatment befitting honored guests, consume without reciprocation, abuse servants, and harass the queen. Each feast, sometimes multiple daily, drains resources meant to sustain the community year-round. Their conduct represents not merely an affront to Odysseus's family, but a corruption of the social contract itself. Among the servants, divisions appear. Some, like swineherd Umus and nurse Eurycle, maintain loyalty. Others shift allegiance to the suitors, seeing them as the new power. The goat-herd Menthus openly sides with the interlopers. Serving women enter relationships with suitors, further fragmenting household cohesion. The palace itself mirrors this disorder. Public spaces intended for assemblies and ceremonial functions are hijacked for perpetual feasts. Storerooms are depleted, privacy violated, boundaries erased. The ordered household becomes a zone of transgression. Beyond the palace, the crisis extends to the broader estates. The suitors slaughter livestock unsustainably, threatening both present and future production. Generational stewardship gives way to short-term plunder. Restoration requires not just the suitors' deaths, but a cleansing of the household, washing away blood, fumigating with sulfur, re-establishing physical and social boundaries. The king's return restores not only family, but an entire economic and social order. Most poignant is Argos, Odysseus's dog, who has aged into neglect, lying on a dung heap. He recognizes his disguised master immediately, wags his tail once, and dies, having lived long enough to witness his master's return. Argos embodies the decay of the household's peripheries during Odysseus's absence, maintaining loyalty even when care and order vanish. The Ithacan crisis operates on multiple levels: personal, familial, economic, political, and moral. This layered tension gives Odysseus's return its full significance, not just as a husband reuniting with his wife, but as the restorer of a world turned upside down. Homer's depiction balances social and economic structures with deeply personal perspectives. The household exists simultaneously as system and individual, structure and emotion. Through this dual lens, the poem conveys both the intimate human cost of disorder and the profound relief of restored harmony. Only now, after establishing Ithaca's plight and following Telemachus's journey, does Homer introduce Odysseus himself. We find him not in heroic action, but in profound suspension, stranded on the island of Ogygia, captive to the nymph Calypso. For 7 years, Odysseus has lived in this paradisiacal prison. Calypso's island is materially perfect. Fragrant cypress groves, abundant food, a warm bed, and the love of an immortal being. She even offers him eternal life, ageless and undying, should he remain as her consort. Yet he sits daily on the shore, gazing at the sea, weeping for home. His tears never cease. His longing remains undiminished by comfort or time. Calypso's paradise has become his purgatory. This image, the man who refuses immortality to preserve his identity, reveals Odysseus's core character. Identity is the sum of connections, history, and place within a human community. Ogygia offers physical ease but denies social selfhood. No one in Ithaca would know his fate. His name would vanish from memory. He would exist outside the web of relationships that give life meaning. Calypso herself is a study in immortal psychology. Unlike the monsters Odysseus has faced, she genuinely loves him. She rescued him from near death, nursed him to health, and offered everything within her power. Through him, Homer reveals the complexity of human nature, the coexistence of wisdom and folly, loyalty and betrayal, endurance and error. That is why, across 3 millennia, the Odyssey continues to speak to us. It is not only the story of one man's voyage across a mythic sea, but the story of all who journey through hardship and longing toward the place we call home. This complexity makes Odysseus the first truly psychological hero in Western literature. He is a man whose internal conflicts are as gripping as the perils he faces in the external world. His journey is not merely across perilous seas, but through the dangerous currents of his own psyche. While Odysseus battles gods and monsters in a quest to return home, his kingdom of Ithaca faces a crisis of its own, one that threatens the very social fabric of his realm. Picture Ithaca as Homer paints it, a rocky island kingdom off Greece's western coast. Not grand or wealthy by worldly standards, but a land of deep attachment for its absent sovereign. The palace that once enforced order now becomes a stage for escalating chaos during Odysseus's prolonged absence. For 3 years, 108 young nobles from Ithaca and nearby islands have occupied the palace, ostensibly vying for Penelope's hand in marriage. Yet their conduct exposes their true character, not noble suitors, but parasites draining the absent king's wealth. They slaughter Odysseus's livestock for lavish feasts.
They harass the palace servants.
They plot to kill Telemachus. They show utter contempt for the hospitality customs that underpin their society. As one observer remarks, respect for guest, friend, suppliant, or even the gods of the broad heaven has vanished. This scenario reflects a profound social and political collapse. Without Odysseus, no authority exists to enforce order. Telemachus is too young and inexperienced to assume control. Penelope's ambiguous marital status leaves succession uncertain. The elders of Ithaca appear either unwilling or incapable of restraining the nobles. The crisis at home mirrors broader questions of societal order. What occurs when legitimate authority disappears? How fragile are the laws and customs that sustain a community? Who bears responsibility for justice when traditional structures fail? The economic ramifications are significant. The suitor's prolonged occupation depletes the royal household's resources, wealth that took generations to amass. Upon Odysseus's return, he will confront threats not only to his family, but also to his very livelihood. Central to this turmoil is Penelope, maintaining a delicate balance between resistance and accommodation. Her situation exemplifies the precarious position of women in a society where male protection dictates social status. Without a husband, father, or adult son to defend her interests, she relies on intelligence and patience to survive. For Tmicus, the crisis represents a harsh coming of age. Raised without a father in a besieged palace, he struggles to find his voice and purpose. His journey to uncover news of Odysseus is as much a quest for self-discovery as for knowledge of his father's fate. No reading of this epic is complete without acknowledging its divine dimension. The gods are active participants, shaping events in both visible and invisible ways. Olympus mirrors human society, complete with politics, conflicts, and alliances. Zeus reigns as the ultimate authority, but each god pursues personal agendas. Their involvement creates a complex tension between divine will and human agency that lies at the heart of the epic. Odysseus's fate is caught between two opposing divine forces, Athena's unwavering support and Poseidon's relentless wrath. These gods represent more than supernatural allies or enemies. They embody cosmic principles reflected in Odysseus himself. Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, recognizes a kindred spirit in Odysseus, a mortal embodying intelligence, cunning, and foresight. Her aid comes not through removing obstacles, but by offering guidance and timely intervention. She is the voice of practical wisdom, aiding those willing to act. Poseidon's enmity stems from Odysseus blinding his son Polyphemus. As god of the sea, earthquakes, and horses, Poseidon embodies untamed natural forces, chaos, and danger. His opposition drives the central tension of the hero's journey, forcing Odysseus to navigate powers beyond his control. Beyond these personal divine interactions lies a broader religious structure. The Homeric world follows clear spiritual principles. The gods expect proper worship and hospitality, punishing transgression and rewarding piety. They uphold oaths and familial bonds. Xenia, the sacred law of hospitality, is paramount. Zeus himself is Zeus Xenos, guardian of guests and suppliants. The suitors and Cyclops' violations mark them as enemies of divine order, deserving retribution. Yet the relationship between fate, Moira, and divine will remains nuanced. Even Zeus acknowledges limits to divine power, attributing human suffering beyond their destined share to folly rather than divine plan. This allows human responsibility within a God-governed universe. The tension between fate, divine will, and human choice defines the moral framework of the epic. Humans act meaningfully within constraints not of their making, and divine justice manifests through natural consequences as much as supernatural intervention. The gods, despite their power, remain recognizably human, jealous, proud, compassionate, angry. They favor, hold grudges, debate, and sometimes reverse decisions. This humanization makes the cosmic order relatable, not alien. With these foundations, historical context, poet structure, hero, home crisis, and divine framework, we follow the twin journeys at the epic's heart. Timachus seeking his father, and Odysseus's long path home. Homer begins not with Odysseus, but with Timachus, a youth on the brink of adulthood, struggling in the void left by his father's absence. For 20 years, Timachus has lived a half-life, too young to remember his father, too old to remain passive before the suitor's abuses. He has grown up in a palace under siege, watching intruders consume his inheritance and harass his mother. Without a father to guide him, he is hesitant, uncertain, a prince without authority in his own home. When first introduced, Telemachus sits among the suitors, daydreaming of his father's return, imagining Odysseus storming the palace, expelling the parasites, reclaiming his throne.
It is a fantasy of rescue, not a plan of action.
Divine intervention changes this.
Athena, disguised as Odysseus's old companion Mentes, visits the palace.
She sees Telemachus's potential to emulate his father, not merely in appearance, but in cunning and resolve. Her words spark the young man, planting the first seeds of independent action. "You must not cling to boyhood any longer," she tells him. "You are no longer a child." This divine nudge propels Telemachus to his first political act, calling an assembly of Ithacan elders, the first since Odysseus left for Troy 20 years prior. Before men who barely recall the last summons, Telemachus finds his voice. He denounces the suitors, appeals to the elders' sense of justice, and demands a ship to seek news of his father. Here we glimpse the man he may become, a public figure stepping from the shadows of absent father and protective mother. The suitors mock him. The community offers no help. Yet with Athena's continued guidance, Telemachus secures a ship and crew, slipping from Ithaca under night's cover while the suitors feast, unaware. His journey leads first to Pios, the realm of aged Nator, who fought alongside Odysseus at Troy. Here, Telemachus encounters proper hospitality, warmly welcomed, bathed, feasted, and honored before Nator even asks his name or purpose. Nator, the oldest Greek chieftain from Troy, represents living memory of Odysseus, the warrior. He recounts his father's intelligence and strategic brilliance, confirming Telemachus's quest is for a man of exceptional merit. From Pios, Telemachus travels by chariot to Sparta with Nator's son Pisces Stratus. There, he meets Manaus and Helen, the couple whose marital discord sparked the Trojan War. The palace gleams with treasures accumulated during Manaus's return from Troy. Once again, Telemachus experiences exemplary hospitality. Helen recognizes him as Odysseus's son, his resemblance revealing his identity. Telemachus grows into himself, no longer merely a boy left behind. Manaus provides vital news obtained from the ancient sea god Proteus. Odysseus is alive but held captive on the island of the nymph Calypso, suffering greatly. For the first time, Telemachus has confirmation of his father's survival, instilling renewed purpose and determination. Her island, which she tends alone, reflects both her divine capacity for creation and her essential isolation. When Hermes arrives with Zeus's command to release Odysseus, Calypso responds with a bitter awareness of divine double standards.
Male gods freely pursue mortal women, she observes, yet when a goddess loves a mortal man, it becomes intolerable.
Her complaint highlights the gendered politics of Olympus and may hint at Homer's subtle critique of patriarchal authority. Despite her reluctance, Calypso assists Odysseus in constructing a raft to leave her island. She provides tools, materials, provisions, and even sailing directions. Her final gift, garments to keep him warm and dry, represents her lingering care even as she releases him to his chosen fate. The Calypso episode crystallizes a central theme of the epic, the tension between temptation and homecoming. Throughout his journey, Odysseus faces variations of this choice: comfort versus struggle, present pleasure versus future identity, the extraordinary versus the ordinary. Time and again, after delays and diversions, he recommits to Ithaca, to Penelope, to his mortal life with all its constraints and connections. This choice resonates particularly because Odysseus's epithet, polyropos, man of many turns or many ways, suggests his adaptability and capacity for transformation.
He could become many things, live many lives, yet he insists on returning to his specific existence, his unique identity.
His flexibility of mind exists in dynamic tension with his unwavering commitment to home. As his raft vanishes over the horizon, we leave Calypso on her island, an immortal forced to confront the transience that defines human experience. Her love for Odysseus draws her closer to understanding mortality with all its poignancy and urgency. Perhaps this too is part of the hero's legacy, shaping even divine beings through the dignity of human limitation. Freedom from Calypso's island does not mean freedom from peril. 17 days into his voyage, as land finally appears on the horizon, disaster strikes. Poseidon, returning from the Ethiopians, spots Odysseus on his raft and erupts in fury. The god of the sea neither forgets nor forgives Odysseus for blinding his son Polyphemus. What follows is one of the epic's most vivid sequences, a storm of divine magnitude. Poseidon summons winds from every direction, raises mountainous waves, and shrouds all in impenetrable clouds. Odysseus's carefully built raft disintegrates plank by plank. The sea itself seems to rise with conscious malevolence. The storm embodies the terrifying power of natural forces, the chaos and violence lurking beneath an orderly cosmos. For ancient maritime cultures, the sea provided both sustenance and perpetual danger. Every voyage was an act of courage, a temporary triumph over elemental forces that could reclaim the traveler at any moment. Odysseus's response demonstrates both heroism and hard-earned wisdom. Unlike earlier in his journey when he might have defied the god, he now recognizes the futility of confronting Poseidon on the god's terms. Instead of resisting impossible odds, he adapts. When his raft finally collapses, he discards Calypso's garments, which drag him down, and clings to a single beam like an experienced horseman. The sea goddess Ano, also called Luca, appears, taking pity on the struggling hero. She offers her veil as a magical flotation device, instructing him to discard it upon reaching shore. This timely divine assistance exemplifies a recurring pattern. The gods aid those who have exhausted every natural resource. For 2 days and nights, Odysseus battles the raging sea. Here, he is stripped to his essential qualities: physical endurance, mental resilience, strategic thinking, and the will to survive. Gone are the trappings of kingship, the company of loyal men, even the clothes on his back. What remains is the hero in his purest form, the man fighting against oblivion. Upon reaching the shores of Phthia, a new challenge emerges: jagged rocks where waves crash with bone-crushing force. Odysseus must act quickly, calculating where a river meets the sea to find a safe landing. Swimming parallel to the coast, battling exhaustion and despair, he finally discovers a protected inlet. Reaching landmarks more than physical salvation. It signifies his transition from Poseidon's chaotic domain to the ordered world of human society. His crawl from the water onto the beach, collapsing in utter exhaustion, evokes both birth imagery and the evolutionary journey from sea to land. He has survived not just a storm, but a symbolic death and rebirth. Finding shelter beneath 2 intertwined olive trees, one wild, one cultivated, Odysseus nests in leaves and falls into a deep sleep. This humble bed symbolizes his position between worlds, nature and civilization, divine hostility and human hospitality, wild seas and ordered society. After 20 days of struggle, he rests at last, poised to enter a new phase of his journey. The Poseidon episode demonstrates how the epic marries realistic detail with cosmic significance.
Homer's descriptions of the storm, swimming,
and coastal hazards reflect intimate knowledge of Mediterranean maritime conditions. Yet these challenges simultaneously function as spiritual and psychological trials. The storm is natural disaster and divine retribution, external threat and internal struggle. Odysseus survives not solely through strength, but through mind and spirit. His tenacity, adaptability, and refusal to surrender even stripped of every advantage, establish him as a hero whose greatness lies not in glorious victory, but in the profound achievement of enduring against overwhelming odds. If the Calypso episode explores temptation and the storm tests endurance, the Phaeton interlude examines reintegration of the isolated hero into human society. After years of captivity and days of solitary struggle, Odysseus must remember how to exist among people, how to behave and speak in ways that earn acceptance rather than rejection. This process begins with one of the poem's most charming scenes. Princess Norsa, daughter of the Phaeton king and queen, comes to the river mouth near where Odysseus sleeps. Prompted by Athena in a dream, she brings palace laundry to wash, including her own clothing. Thoughts of future marriage subtly cross her mind as she spreads garments to dry. Norsa and her handmaidens play a ball game, their shouts awakening Odysseus, who emerges from the bushes, naked, caked with salt, wild from his ordeal. The handmaidens scatter, but Norsa stands her ground, emboldened by Athena. The ensuing encounter reveals Odysseus's diplomatic skill. Though desperate, he recognizes that approaching the princess directly might frighten her. He maintains distance, delivering a tactful speech, comparing her to Artemis, requesting basic assistance, and appealing to her future happiness. Through language alone, he transforms from a threatening stranger to a worthy suppliant. Norsa responds graciously, providing clothing, food, directions to the palace, and practical advice for approaching her parents. Her composure and generosity, remarkable for someone so young, establish her as an exemplar of proper treatment of strangers. If Ithaca's suitors represent the violation of hospitality norms, Norsa embodies their perfect fulfillment. Beneath this exchange runs a current of subtle attraction. Homer hints at Norsa's interest in the mysterious foreigner, noting her private comment that she wouldn't mind a husband like him, or that she hopes he might stay in Phaeton. Odysseus, for his part, recognizes her exceptional qualities, comparing her to a young palm tree he once saw at Apollo's shrine in Delos. Yet both understand the impossibility of a deeper connection. Odysseus's heart remains fixed on home. Norsa, though fascinated, maintains the decorum proper to her station. Their interaction exemplifies a bittersweet recognition of what might have been, gracefully acknowledged and set aside. Following Norsa's guidance, Odysseus approaches the palace indirectly, aided by Athena in the form of a concealing mist. The Phaeton palace represents the height of civilized existence. Gleaming with bronze, silver, and gold, surrounded by fertile orchards tended by skilled servants, the royal couple, Alcinous and Arete, preside over an island untouched by war, blessed with ships swift as thought. Entering as a suppliant, grasping Queen Arete's knees in traditional submission, Odysseus is met with exemplary hospitality. Food, drink, and lodging are offered before his name or purpose is even asked. He is promised safe passage to his destination, treated as a guest under divine protection, justifiably so, given Athena's involvement. The following day, the Phaeacians honor him with athletic games. When a young athlete mocks him, suggesting he looks more like a merchant than a sportsman, Odysseus responds by easily winning the discus throw, demonstrating his enduring strength despite recent trials. This minor triumph foreshadows his eventual victory over the young suitors at home. The evening feast brings the pivotal moment of the Phaeton episode. The court bard, Demodocus, sings of the Trojan War, first of the quarrel between Odysseus and Achilles, then of the Trojan horse strategy devised by Odysseus. Moved by memories of lost friends and endured hardships, Odysseus weeps behind his cloak. King Alcinous notices and gently asks the question that shifts the epic from third-person narration to first-person account. "Who are you? Tell us your name." In response, Odysseus finally reveals his identity, beginning the tale of his wanderings since leaving Troy, a narrative that will span the next 4 books of the epic. This moment of revelation carries immense emotional weight. For the first time since leaving Calypso's island, Odysseus openly reclaims his name and identity. He steps from anonymity into his own legend, bridging the gap between past glory and present circumstances. The attentive, admiring Phaeacian audience represents the first step toward restoring his social standing, a receptive community acknowledging his trials and celebrating his resilience. The Phaeacian episode thus serves several narrative purposes. It gives Odysseus a sympathetic audience for his tale, creating the frame for recounting his earlier adventures. It demonstrates proper hospitality, contrasting sharply with the suitor's perversion of these norms. It also shows Odysseus relearning social skills long dormant during his years of isolation. More subtly, the Phaeacians embody an idealized society, a halfway point between the magical realms he has traversed and the flawed human world of Ithaca. Their exceptional ships, divine blessings, and freedom from ordinary toil place them at the boundary between the mundane and the marvelous. They provide a transitional space, allowing Odysseus to process extraordinary experiences before returning to human society. When he concludes his story, the Phaeacians load him with gifts, more treasure than he would have received from Troy's plunder had he returned directly. They deliver him, asleep, to the shores of Ithaca, placing him and his newfound wealth gently on the beach before departing. This peaceful transition from guest to returning king contrasts sharply with the violent homecoming that awaits. The Phaeacian interlude thus completes Odysseus's emergence from isolation and anonymity. Having survived divine captivity and natural catastrophe, having reclaimed his name and shared his story, he now stands ready to reclaim his place in the human world, not as a supplicant seeking acceptance, but as a king determined to restore justice to his domain. Seated among the Phaeacians, the guest of honor in a gleaming hall far from home, Odysseus begins his tale. His voice, unused to extended speech after years of solitude, carries the weight of memories long suppressed. "I am Odysseus, son of Laertes," he declares, claiming his identity fully for the first time since leaving Aegea. This act of self-naming is itself courageous. In a world where names carry power, Odysseus has learned the danger of revelation. The proud declaration to the Cyclops provoked Poseidon's wrath. Yet here, among potential allies, he reclaims his name and the story that accompanies it. What follows is not a simple chronology, but a carefully crafted narrative. Odysseus proves himself as masterful a storyteller as he is a strategist. He selects, arranges, and emphasizes events for maximum impact on his audience. Whether every detail is literal matters less than the truth of experience, the emotional reality of a journey testing human limits at every turn. From Troy, with 12 ships and their crews, Odysseus first raids the land of the Cyclone. This brief military venture, initially successful, turns against the Greeks when reinforcements arrive. Men seize plunder, kill, and take women captive, acting as conquerors typically would. Odysseus urges prompt departure, but his men prefer feasting on the beach, leaving themselves exposed to counterattack. When Ionian reinforcements arrive, significant casualties ensue. 6 men lost from each ship before retreating to sea. This minor defeat foreshadows greater losses and establishes a pattern. Odysseus gives sound counsel that his men often disregard, to their detriment. Blown off course by storms, they next encounter the lotus eaters, a people subsisting on a flowering plant, inducing peaceful forgetfulness. The men Odysseus sends to explore eat the lotus, losing all desire to return home, wishing only to remain and consume more. Odysseus drags them back to the ships, ties them beneath the benches, and orders immediate departure. The lotus eaters pose no violent threat, but embody a more insidious danger, surrendering purpose, memory, and identity for pleasant sensation. Their episode introduces a central theme: the tension between the allure of forgetting and the painful necessity of remembering. Throughout his wanderings, Odysseus consistently rejects easy escape in favor of the difficult path homeward. The next landing brings disaster on a larger scale. The land of the Cyclopes, giant solitary shepherds without laws or community. Odysseus takes 12 men to explore a cave stocked with cheese and milk. Despite his companions' urgings to take provisions and leave, Odysseus insists on waiting to meet the cave's owner, hoping for customary gifts. Polyphemus returns and discovers the intruders, revealing monstrous disregard for divine law. "We do not care about Zeus or the blessed gods," he declares, seizing 2 men, smashing their heads and devouring them raw. He blocks the cave entrance with a massive boulder and sleeps, leaving the survivors trapped. The Cyclops episode is a contest between brute strength and intelligence. Unable to move the boulder or defeat the giant directly, Odysseus relies on strategy, the quality defining him. He offers the Cyclops potent wine, loosening his caution. When Polyphemus asks his name, Odysseus cunningly replies, "Nobody," while the giant sleeps in drunken stupor. Odysseus and his men harden a massive wooden stake in the fire and drive it into the Cyclops' single eye. Polyphemus' agonized roar draws other Cyclopes to his cave, but when asked who harmed him, he replies, "Nobody is killing me by craft, not force." They depart, leaving him to suffer. Odysseus weaponizes language itself, using the ambiguity between a name and negation to escape immediate retribution. To leave the cave, the Greeks cling to the undersides of Polyphemus' sheep as he releases them to pasture, hiding where the blind giant cannot detect them. This escape demonstrates Odysseus' tactical ingenuity, exploiting the one path beyond the monster's senses. Yet, in a moment of hubris, Odysseus commits a fatal error. Safe aboard his ship, he cannot resist mocking Polyphemus and revealing his true name.
"If any mortal asks who blinded you," he shouts, "tell them it was Odysseus, sacker of cities, son of Laertes, whose home is Ithaca." This boast transforms a tactical victory into a strategic disaster.
Polyphemus, now aware of his attacker, prays to Poseidon for vengeance. The sea god answers, setting in motion the divine enmity that costs Odysseus all his ships, most of his men, and nearly a decade of wandering. The Cyclops episode is rich in symbolism. Polyphemus represents pre-civilized existence, a world without agriculture, laws, assembly, or ships. His single eye suggests limited perspective, incapable of perceiving depth or complexity. His solitary dwelling reflects a life contrary to Greek ideals of polis and community. By blinding him, Odysseus asserts civilization, strategy, and collective action over solitary brute force. Yet the episode also exposes Odysseus' fatal flaw. Pride in his cleverness, the very name he strives to uphold, becomes the cause of extended suffering. Identity proves both essential and dangerous, a double-edged sword. After escaping Polyphemus, Odysseus' fleet reaches the floating island of Alas, keeper of the winds. The divine host treats them hospitably for a month, then provides supernatural assistance, a leather bag containing all contrary winds, leaving only the westerly breeze free to blow them toward Ithaca. For 9 days, Odysseus personally mans the sheet, refusing sleep. Success is within sight. They see fires on Ithaca's shore. At this critical moment, exhaustion overtakes him, and he falls into deep slumber. His men, long suspicious of the bag's contents, assume it hides treasure their leader intends to keep. They open it while he sleeps. The captive winds explode outward, creating a devastating storm that blows the fleet back to Alas's island. When Odysseus returns to request aid, Alas recoils. "A man so clearly cursed by the gods deserves no help," he reasons, refusing even to hear Odysseus' plea. This second rejection emphasizes how a single breach of trust compounds into greater isolation. The Iolus episode reinforces the theme of nearly reaching home, only to face renewed exile. It also highlights the fatal dynamic between Odysseus and his men. His secrecy breeds suspicion, their impulsiveness undermines strategy. 6 days of rowing bring the fleet to the land of the Laestrygonians, giant cannibals. Odysseus prudently keeps his own ship outside the harbor while sending scouts ahead.
This caution saves him, but not the rest of the fleet.
The Laestrygonians destroy 11 ships and devour their crews, spearing men like fish and carrying them off for a grisly feast. Only Odysseus' ship survives. In moments, he has gone from commanding hundreds to just dozens, his responsibility intensified by catastrophic loss. This swift destruction marks the darkest point of his journey and sets the stage for the extended interlude on Circe's island. With one ship and a desperate crew, Odysseus lands on Aya, home of the enchantress Circe. Dividing his remaining men into 2 groups, he sends the first, led by his kinsman Eurylochus, to explore. They discover a palace surrounded by docile lions and wolves, animals transformed by Circe's magic. Inside, the goddess welcomes them with a feast imbued with magical ingredients. After they eat, she touches them with her wand, transforming all but Eurylochus, who had remained wary outside, into swine, preserving their human minds within animal bodies. When Eurylochus returns with news of this horror, Odysseus sets out alone to confront the enchantress. On his way, he encounters Hermes, who provides a magical herb called Molly to protect against Circe's spells, along with precise instructions for subduing her. Following this divine guidance, Odysseus resists the enchantress's magic, draws his sword, and compels her to swear an oath not to harm him. This confrontation evolves into an extended stay on Aya. Circe restores the men to human form, hosts the crew for a full year of feasting, and becomes Odysseus's lover. This interlude of pleasure and respite tempts the crew to forget their ultimate mission entirely. Only when his men finally confront him, appealing to his desire for home, does Odysseus address departure. Her response introduces the next essential challenge. Before they may return, she instructs them to journey to the land of the dead to consult the prophet Tiresias. This descent into the underworld marks a crucial spiritual dimension of Odysseus's journey. To move forward, he must first go deeper, confronting death itself and the shadows of his past. Following Circe's directions, Odysseus sails to the western edge of the world, where sunlight never reaches and underworld rivers pour into the sea. There, he performs the prescribed rituals, digging a pit, pouring libations, sacrificing animals, letting their blood flow to summon the spirits of the dead. The shades gather, drawn by the scent of blood, but Odysseus holds them at bay with his sword until Tiresias arrives. The blind prophet drinks from the sacrifice and delivers his prophecy. He warns of the danger posed by Helios's cattle on Thracia, predicts Odysseus's return to Ithaca and confrontation with the suitors, and foretells a final journey inland, carrying an oar to people unfamiliar with the sea, who mistake it for a winnowing fan. After Tiresias departs, Odysseus allows the other spirits to approach the blood and speak. His mother Anticlea reveals she died of grief during his absence. Her shade tries to embrace him 3 times, passing through his arms like smoke, a heart-rending depiction of the unbridgeable divide between the living and the dead. Odysseus also encounters legendary women and former comrades from Troy. Agamemnon's spirit warns him to return to Ithaca secretly, trusting no one. Even his wife, after her own murder of Agamemnon and her affair with Achilles, delivers perhaps the epic's most famous line, "I would rather be a hired servant on earth for a man of little property than rule over all the dead." Most poignant is Odysseus's meeting with Ajax, who committed suicide over losing Achilles' armor to him. Despite Odysseus's pleas, Ajax refuses to speak, preserving in death the grudge that consumed him in life. This silent rejection reminds us of the human cost of Odysseus's competitive excellence, how his victories leave enduring wounds. The underworld sequence serves multiple purposes. It grants crucial knowledge for his return home, reconnects him with past triumphs and losses, and adds a metaphysical layer to his physical wanderings. Full homecoming requires reconciliation with death and memory, as well as return to Ithaca. When Odysseus and his crew return to Aya, Circe provides guidance for the remaining dangers, the sirens whose song lures sailors to death, the passage between Scylla and Charybdis, where one must risk some lives or lose all, and the island of Thracia, with Helios's sacred cattle, which must remain untouched. Armed with this knowledge, Odysseus implements countermeasures. For the sirens, he binds himself to the mast, while his men plug their ears with beeswax. This famous image of the bound hero straining against ropes while hearing the irresistible song captures the essence of his journey, experiencing what would destroy others, yet surviving through foresight, discipline, and willing constraint. The sirens tempt him not with pleasure, but with knowledge, appealing to his curiosity, the same drive behind both his greatest achievements and costly mistakes. By hearing their song but resisting its pull, Odysseus achieves balance between experience and restraint. Next comes the agonizing decision to pass Scylla, the six-headed monster, or Charybdis, the deadly whirlpool. Circe advised the first, better to lose 6 men than the entire crew. Odysseus accepts this calculus but initially conceals the inevitability of loss from his men. Approaching the strait, he arms himself despite knowing combat is futile, a gesture revealing his character. While the crew focuses on the visible threat of Charybdis, Scylla strikes from above, snatching 6 men. Odysseus describes their deaths in excruciating detail. Flailing limbs, voices calling his name, final struggles as they are devoured. This moment embodies the ultimate burden of leadership, continuing to navigate forward while witnessing unbearable loss. The Scylla episode strips heroism of romance, revealing its raw emotional cost. Having navigated these perils, the depleted crew reaches Thracia, home to Helios's sacred cattle. Despite explicit warnings, a storm forces them ashore.
Odysseus makes his men swear an oath not to touch the cattle.
For a month they survive on birds and fish. But when starvation looms, Eurylochus persuades the crew to risk divine punishment, and they slaughter Helios's finest cattle, justifying their transgression with promised sacrifices. Upon departure, Odysseus finds that despite proper rituals, ominous signs appear. Hides crawl, meat bleats on the spit, omens of cosmic violation.
Zeus punishes the offense.
A devastating storm destroys the ship, killing all but Odysseus, who lashed together mast and keel to form a raft. Carried past Scylla and Charybdis, he barely survives, clinging to a fig tree until his raft resurfaces. 9 days of drift finally bring him to Aegea, Calypso's island, completing a narrative circle. From this nadir, having lost ship, men, and hope, we have already witnessed his eventual escape and arrival among the Phaeacians. As Odysseus concludes, silence fills the Phaeacian hall. This first-person account reveals dimensions invisible from the outside, his choices, emotional responses, moments of brilliance and error. Homer allows him agency to shape identity through narrative, just as he must rebuild it through action upon returning to Ithaca. The Wanderings chart moral and psychological terrain as much as geographical. Each adventure tests human nature, the Lotus Eater's allure of forgetfulness, civilization versus savagery with the Cyclops, trust and suspicion with Alas, pleasure and stasis with Circe, forbidden knowledge with the Sirens, impossible losses with Scylla and Charybdis, tragic rationalizations with Helios's cattle. These episodes explore human limits and aspirations. Odysseus emerges neither a perfect hero nor mere victim of divine caprice, but a man navigating impossible circumstances with extraordinary yet flawed abilities. His survival results from divine favor, personal excellence, and luck, a trinity the Greeks recognized as governing fortune. As the Phaeacians prepare to deliver him to Ithaca on ships swift as thought, The wandering phase concludes. The next challenge is not survival among monsters or gods, but reclaiming his place in the human world he left 20 years prior. The Phaeacians fulfill their promise. Their miraculous ship carries the sleeping Odysseus to Ithaca, where they place him and his treasures gently on the shore before departing. Upon awakening, he finds himself surrounded by morning mist, unable to recognize the homeland he has longed for. This disorientation captures a profound truth. Homecoming after prolonged absence is never immediate. Places change, memory falters. The returning traveler must reconcile imagined home with present reality. For Odysseus, this begins with near despair.
Has he been abandoned, left on a strange shore with his gifts?
Athena appears, first disguised as a young shepherd, then revealing herself to her favored mortal. Their exchange highlights their special bond, divine patronage blended with mutual respect. When asked why he does not immediately recognize home, Odysseus cautiously invents a false identity. The goddess smiles, approving his craft, noting that anyone matching Odysseus would need to be a master deceiver. Together, they hide his treasures in a nearby cave. Then Athena transforms him into an aged beggar, stooping his posture, wrinkling his skin, clouding his bright eyes, and clothing him in tattered rags. This disguise serves several purposes. Practically, it shields him from the suitors who would kill him immediately if recognized. Strategically, it allows him to observe his palace unnoticed, testing loyalties before revealing himself. Symbolically, it marks his liminal status, physically present in Ithaca, yet not restored to his true identity or position. Meanwhile, Athena departs for Sparta to retrieve Telemachus, who has lingered too long, enjoying Menelaus's hospitality.
Warned in a dream of the suitor's ambush, the young man begins his journey home.
Synchronized with his father's return, one of several carefully orchestrated parallel movements characterizing the later books. Disguised as a beggar, Odysseus seeks out the dwelling of his swineherd, Umus. Following Athena's guidance, this humble hut, far from the palace's corrupt splendor, becomes the staging ground for reclaiming his kingdom. Here, Odysseus encounters the first example of steadfast loyalty among his servants. Despite his ragged appearance, Umus welcomes the stranger with all the hospitality his modest means allow, sharing food, providing shelter, and treating him with dignity. This warm reception sharply contrasts with the suitor's cruelty, highlighting a central theme. True nobility manifests in behavior, not birth or wealth. Umus, though a slave, embodies the ethical code that the highborn suitors violate. His hospitality toward a seeming beggar reveals deeper aristocratic values than the palace's destructive entitlement. Over a simple meal, Odysseus and Umus exchange stories. Odysseus weaves an elaborate false tale, claiming to be a Cretan warrior who fought at Troy, endured many misadventures, and eventually heard news of Odysseus preparing to return home. This embedded narrative showcases the hero's improvisational genius while allowing him to gather information safely. Umus responds with skepticism. He has heard too many false reports from travelers seeking advantage, but shares his own story. Born a prince, kidnapped by Phoenician traders with a treacherous nursemaid's aid, and ultimately purchased by Laertes, Odysseus's father. This narrative creates a poignant counterpoint. A nobleman living as a slave speaks with the king disguised as a beggar. For several days, Odysseus remains with Umus, learning the state of Ithaca and observing the swineherd's steadfast character. This interlude provides a fuller picture of Ithaca beyond the palace, showing how his long absence has affected the wider community and economy. Through conversations with Umus and others, he learns how the herds have suffered, how servants have responded, and how the political situation has decayed. The swineherd's peaceful hut is soon disturbed by Telemachus, who has successfully evaded the suitor's sea ambush. Following Athena's instructions, he lands in a remote part of Ithaca and goes directly to Umus instead of the palace, demonstrating his growing maturity compared with the naive youth who left weeks earlier. When Umus leaves to report Telemachus's safe return to Penelope, Athena appears visible only to Odysseus, instructing him to reveal himself to his son. With a touch of her wand, she temporarily restores his true appearance. The disguise falls away. Odysseus stands before Telemachus in his actual form, strong, handsome, regal. The young man's reaction reveals both the emotional power and danger of the moment. Initially believing a god has appeared, he averts his eyes, exclaiming, "Just now you were old and shabbily clothed. Now you are like the gods who rule the wide heavens." When Odysseus identifies himself, Telemachus hesitates. "You cannot be my father," he protests. "Some god deceives me to make grief even more painful." This resistance, born of years of disappointment, makes their eventual embrace all the more poignant. When recognition finally occurs, both weep openly. Homer compares their cries to keening eagles whose nestlings have been stolen, a rare simile linking human emotion to the animal world, emphasizing the primal nature of their reunion. Once the initial surge subsides, father and son begin plotting the suitors' destruction. This immediate shift from reunion to conspiracy highlights the urgency of their relationship. Not a peaceful homecoming, but preparation for necessary violence. Odysseus outlines strategy, counts the suitors, assesses allies, and instructs Telemachus on his role. Despite 20 years apart, they establish a working partnership grounded in shared purpose and complementary skills. Odysseus resumes his beggar disguise before Umus returns, preserving secrecy from all but his son. Together they plan the palace approach, Telemachus first, Odysseus following as a seemingly random beggar seeking charity. This allows him to observe and position himself for the forthcoming attack. Before the plan unfolds, Homer provides a poignant counterpoint. The story of Argos, Odysseus's hunting dog. Once renowned for speed and senses, Argos now lies neglected on a dung heap, old, flea-ridden, abandoned. Yet, when Odysseus passes, the dog recognizes him. Despite the disguise no human can pierce, Argos wags his tail and lowers his ears in greeting, then dies, fulfilling his final purpose and witnessing his master's return. This brief, heartbreaking scene offers multiple layers: recognition after doubt, the decay of his household, the inevitability of time, and the power of love-piercing disguise, an echo of later moments when the old nurse Eurycle recognizes Odysseus by his scar. Telemachus reaches the palace first, reuniting with Penelope, who embraces him with relief, unaware of the changes underway. Shortly after, Umus leads the disguised Odysseus to the palace, where he confronts the disorder overtaking his home. They encounter Melanthius, the goatherd, allied with the suitors. Unlike Umus, Melanthius responds with contempt and abuse, kicking and mocking the beggar. This contrast establishes the spectrum of loyalty and betrayal within Odysseus's household. Entering as a beggar, Odysseus faces the final humiliation, object of entertainment and cruelty. The suitors, led by Antinous, treat him with calculated malice. When he begs for food, Antinous throws a footstool, striking his back, a brutal testament to the suitors' moral corruption. They violate not only hospitality but sacred duty. Odysseus endures with outward patience, masking inward fury. Each insult fuels the justified rage that will erupt in bloody retribution. Yet restraint demonstrates extraordinary self-control, the same quality that carried him through Polyphemus's cave and Calypso's island. Now within sight of his goal, he maintains the disguise. Not all treat him with contempt. Penelope, hearing of the stranger's arrival and abuse, summons him to inquire about Odysseus. Their conversation creates dramatic irony. The wife speaks unknowingly to her husband. Odysseus fabricates another tale, claiming to have hosted the real Odysseus years ago and providing detailed predictions of his imminent return. This scene of intimate estrangement, physically close, separated by deception, intensifies suspense. Odysseus suppresses the urge to reveal himself. Penelope balances hope against caution. When he accurately describes clothing and companions from 20 years past, she weeps with recognition yet cannot fully connect the man before her with her husband. The barriers to recognition are both physical and psychological, shaped by years of disappointment. Their exchange sets up the final test. Penelope announces a contest. Whoever strings Odysseus's great bow and shoots an arrow through 12 axe handles will win her hand. This impossible task ensures only Odysseus himself can succeed, triggering the approaching confrontation. One final recognition occurs before the contest. The aged nurse Eurycle bathes the disguised Odysseus's feet and notices a scar from a youthful boar hunt. Unlike Argos, this threatens to expose him prematurely.
Odysseus grasps her throat to silence her, warning secrecy, even from Penelope.
This moment highlights a recurring theme. Those with the least power perceive truth most clearly. The dog, the nurse, and the swineherd recognize aspects hidden from those with authority. Their loyalty, stemming from devotion rather than obligation, becomes crucial to the coming restoration. As the contest day nears, omens multiply.
Zeus sends thunder from a cloudless sky.
The seer Theoclymenus, sheltering with Telemachus, experiences horrific visions. Suitors bleeding, ghostly figures, the sun darkened. The suitors mock these signs, but the portents reinforce the moral framework. Their destruction is divine justice for violating home, hospitality, and social order. When Odysseus strings the bow and releases the arrow, he becomes an instrument of cosmic restoration as much as a man reclaiming his kingdom. This extended sequence, from countryside observation to palace infiltration, from loyal servants to traitorous ones, from dog to nurse to wife, serves multiple narrative purposes. It delays the climax, develops Ithaca's transformation, and justifies the extreme violence that will follow. Disguise becomes more than tactic. It symbolizes Odysseus's liminal state. Physically present yet socially absent, he navigates his kingdom from the margins, seeing it through the eyes of those least powerful. This experience transforms him, deepening his understanding of loyalty, power, and justice beyond what his years as acknowledged king had taught him. The beggar's rags also connect him to a broader pattern in Greek heroic tradition, where disguise often precedes revelation. Suffering precedes triumph. Descent precedes ascent, as in the stories of Dita seeking her daughter or Dionysus testing his worshippers. Odysseus employs concealment to distinguish those who recognize essential worth beneath appearances from those who judge solely by outward trappings. As the day of the bow contest arrives, all participants are poised for the unfolding drama. Penelope has established the mechanism for selecting among the suitors, unaware she has crafted the perfect stage for her husband's revenge. Telemachus positions himself as his father's ally while maintaining an outward neutrality. Umus and the loyal cowherd Phloacius have been discreetly informed of Odysseus's identity and enlisted in his cause. The suitors, blind to the impending danger, continue their arrogant rivalry. Odysseus himself, still clad in beggar's rags yet inwardly poised for action, watches, waiting for the moment to cast aside his disguise and reclaim his name, home, and throne. His long physical journey has ended, but the return to his true identity faces its most perilous crossing, the transformation from disguised observer to avenging king. Dawn breaks on the day that will end 20 years of separation and suffering. Penelope, still unaware of her husband's presence, announces the contest. Odysseus's great bow will be presented, and whoever can string it and shoot an arrow through 12 aligned axe heads will win her hand. The bow carries deep significance, a gift from Iphitus, later slain by Heracles. It embodies Odysseus's past identity as warrior and hunter, stored untouched for 20 years like the master himself. Now it re-emerges as the instrument of both testing and retribution. When Umus brings the bow into the hall, he weeps at the sight of his master's weapon. Phleucus, the loyal cowherd who also recognizes the disguised Odysseus, sheds tears alongside him. The suitors mock their emotion, unaware that these servants are already enlisted in the coming vengeance. The challenge proves immediately daunting. None of the younger suitors can even bend the bow to string it. Observing their futile efforts, Odysseus notes each man's strength and weakness, continuing his tactical assessment from a position of apparent insignificance. Antinous, recognizing their difficulty, suggests postponing the contest, citing Apollo's festival, as if the god of archery might be offended. This transparent excuse reveals the suitors' growing awareness of their inadequacy. They who presume to replace Odysseus cannot even wield his weapon. At this critical moment, the disguised Odysseus signals Telemachus, indicating he should allow the beggar to try the bow. Understanding his father's intent, Telemachus asserts authority over the contest, declaring that if he wishes, the stranger may attempt it. Despite objections, he orders Umus to bring the bow to Odysseus. The moment the weapon touches his hands, the disguise begins its metaphorical disintegration. Homer describes the beggar's practiced examination of the bow, checking for worm damage, testing its flexibility with the expertise of a musician scrutinizing an instrument. This casual mastery offers the first public hint of his true identity. With apparent ease, Odysseus strings the bow that defeated all the younger suitors. The tightening string resonates through the hall like a swallow's note. He draws an arrow, sights along its shaft, and shoots through all 12 axe handles without error, a feat of extraordinary precision that silences the hall. Amidst stunned quiet, Odysseus signals Telemachus for action. The young man girds himself with sword and spear, taking position beside his father. Only then does Odysseus cast off the last elements of his disguise. Standing tall on the hall's threshold, a symbolically charged position linking domains, he announces himself. The contest is over. A new target awaits. With these words, he looses an arrow straight into Antinous' throat as the suitor lifts a wine cup to his lips. Antinous falls backward, blood spurting from his nostrils, his foot kicking the table and spilling food across the floor. The feast becomes bloodied. The wine cup drops from lifeless hands, marking the shocking transition from revelry to slaughter. Initial confusion grips the remaining suitors. They assume the killing accidental. What beggar would deliberately slay a nobleman?
Only when Odysseus proclaims his identity do they grasp the gravity of their peril. You dogs, you never thought I would return from Troy. You devoured my household, violated my serving women, and courted my wife while I lived, fearing neither gods nor men.
Now death's cords have fallen upon you all. His declaration transforms violence from mere vengeance into justice, the restoration of divine and human law against those who violated every boundary. Odysseus positions himself as an agent of cosmic order, not merely an aggrieved husband. Eurycus attempts to negotiate, offering restitution, all consumed goods plus 20 oxen from each suitor. Odysseus rejects the offer outright. No payment suffices.
Only blood can atone.
His refusal underscores the epic's moral framework. Some transgressions demand ultimate recompense. Realizing negotiation has failed, the suitors draw swords, seeking shields. Telemachus has already removed hall armor at his father's instruction.
Umus charges, but an arrow pierces his liver. Amphinomus rushes next, only to be speared in the back by Telemachus.
What follows is a methodical slaughter. Odysseus fires until his quiver empties, dropping suitors with each shot. Telemachus fetches additional weapons for his father and the loyal servants, Umus and Phleucus. The doors are secured, trapping the remaining suitors inside. Desperate fighting ensues as the outnumbered attackers face their prey. Athena appears as mentor, encouraging Odysseus, testing his strength and courage before intervening more directly. This divine restraint emphasizes that even with godly favor, human effort remains essential. Homer renders the violence unflinchingly, spears through throats, swords piercing chests, bronze cleaving heads. The floor runs with blood. Men slip as they flee, groaning as bodies fall. The graphic depiction emphasizes the gravity of the suitors' transgressions. Their parasitic indulgence culminates in horrific consequences. The climax comes as Odysseus and his small band face the remaining suitors, led by Aegilis.
Athena finally displays the aegis, the Gorgon-bearing shield, filling the suitors with supernatural terror.
Like cattle driven by a stinging fly, they scatter, cut down one by one. The recurring simile of hunted animals depicts their transformation from predators to prey, fish gasping on shore, doves caught in nets. Mercy is granted to only two, the bard Phineus, who served unwillingly, and the herald Mydon, who aided Telemachus. Telemachus intercedes for both, demonstrating temperance and ethical maturity, a worthy heir to his father. When the fighting ends, the hall resembles a shoreline after a bloody tide, corpses strewn like fish upon sand. Odysseus, spattered with blood like a lion feasting on oxen, orders the disloyal serving women to clean under Telemachus's supervision. These 12 women who betrayed the household and consorted with the suitors are then taken outside and hanged, a grim extension of the purge that claimed the treacherous goatherd Melanthus. An even harsher punishment awaits him: nose, ears, hands and feet cut off, genitals thrown to the dogs, a mutilation expressing betrayal in its extremity. After this brutal cleansing, Odysseus orders the hall fumigated with burning sulfur, a ritual purification serving practical and symbolic purposes. The corrupted space must be reclaimed before normal life resumes. Ura, the old nurse who had earlier recognized Odysseus, brings loyal serving women to welcome their master. They surround him, kissing his head and hands, embracing him with tears of joy. This tender reunion amid slaughter creates a powerful emotional counterpoint. The restoration of order brings not only justice but reconnection with the faithful. Yet for all its cathartic violence and emotional reunion, this sequence represents only partial restoration. Odysseus has reclaimed his palace and eliminated internal threats, but he has not yet reclaimed his marriage. Penelope, having retired before the contest, remains unaware of the bloody events and her husband's true identity. When Ura rushes to inform her of Odysseus's return and the suitor's demise, the queen's response is measured skepticism. Having shielded herself from disappointment for so many years, she cannot surrender immediately to hope. She proposes cautiously that some god must have slain the suitors, or that the beggar is perhaps someone entirely different. This final hesitation to recognize him frames the epic's most intimate and psychologically complex scene. After 20 years of separation and the blood-soaked reclamation of his household, Odysseus faces his ultimate test, convincing his brilliant, cautious wife that he has truly returned. The bow contest and slaughter of the suitors transform the epic from a tale of wandering into one of justice restored. It fulfills the prophecies of Tiresias and divine will expressed from the poem's opening. Yet it raises profound questions about violence, retribution, and restoration that the final books must address. The bloodshed has cleansed the palace, but healing the community, re-establishing political order, and reclaiming intimate relationships demand more than physical triumph. As night falls over the blood-stained hall, Odysseus has eliminated his enemies but stands at the threshold of his most meaningful homecoming, the reunion with the wife whose loyalty and intellect match his own. This final recognition scene, approached with care by both husband and wife, will determine whether Odysseus has truly returned in the fullest sense. The blood has been swept from the palace floors. The suitors' bodies have been claimed by their families. The disloyal servants have been punished. Yet the most profound reunion still awaits. The recognition between husband and wife that will complete Odysseus's homecoming. Penelope descends from her chamber, mind clouded with doubt. For 20 years, she maintained a delicate balance between hope and despair, neither fully accepting his death nor allowing herself to believe in his return. This emotional discipline, paralleling her husband's physical endurance, preserved her autonomy and protected her heart. Now confronted with claims of Odysseus's return, she approaches cautiously, unwilling to surrender her hard-won equilibrium to what may prove another disappointment. Entering the hall, she sees a stranger seated by the fire, cleansed of blood, and dressed in fresh clothing, yet not immediately recognizable as her husband. Despite Telemachus's insistence that this man is Odysseus, she remains reserved. "My child," she tells her frustrated son, "if he is truly Odysseus, let him come home. We shall know each other better than anyone else, for we share signs known only to us." Her demand for private confirmation rather than public testimony reveals her wisdom. Throughout the epic, identities have proven malleable and deceptive. Odysseus himself has assumed false personas with ease. Divine beings have taken human form. Appearances rarely align with reality. In this context, Penelope's caution is not stubborn denial, but measured skepticism, the feminine counterpart to Odysseus's own wariness of the fates, Athena, and all he has encountered.
Odysseus, eager for recognition, respects her prudence.
When Telemachus criticizes his mother's coldness, Odysseus defends her. "Let your mother test me as she will," he says. This mutual respect reflects their deep compatibility, each recognizing in the other a mind that refuses easy assumptions. To create space for their reunion, Odysseus orchestrates a deception for any onlookers outside the palace. He orders music and dancing, masking the aftermath of slaughter with sounds of celebration. This final stratagem, a mock wedding feast concealing carnage, provides cover for the genuine reunion about to unfold. Penelope orders the household to prepare the royal bed for the stranger, deliberately setting a subtle test. When Odysseus responds with controlled outrage, the trap ensnares no impostor, only confirming the truth.
"Woman," he declares, "you wound me to the heart. Who has moved my bed?"
No living man, not even in full strength, could have done so. I built it myself, and a great secret went into its making. He describes in precise detail how he constructed their marriage bed around a living olive tree growing within the palace walls, the chamber built around this immovable natural center. This bed, impossible to move without destruction, perfectly symbolizes their marriage, rooted, skillfully crafted, built to endure. This revelation finally penetrates Penelope's caution. The details were known only to the two of them and a single servant. No impostor could possess such knowledge. The sign she sought, proof beyond appearance or martial skill, has been provided in the most intimate form. Knowledge of the foundation of their marriage. Her response shifts from skepticism to overwhelming emotion. Her knees weaken, her heart melts, tears flow. She rushes to Odysseus, embraces him, and kisses his head. "Do not be angry with me for holding back," she pleads. "My heart always feared deception, for many have plotted against us." Odysseus weeps, holding the wife he has longed for through his wanderings. Homer compares Penelope's welcome to a drowning sailor sighting land, the same metaphor used for Odysseus reaching the Phaeacian shore after shipwreck. This repetition underscores that his physical salvation was incomplete without this emotional homecoming. Only now, recognized by the one who knows him most intimately, has Odysseus truly returned. Their reunion extends through the night, sharing the stories of the intervening years. Odysseus recounts his wanderings, tales familiar to us from the Fates, now imbued with new significance shared with his wife. Penelope describes her long resistance to the suitors, her tricks, delays, and maintenance of hope against mounting doubt. This narrative exchange represents more than catching up. It reintegrates their separate histories into a shared story, bridging the 20-year gap in their marriage. Through mutual recognition of suffering and endurance, they re-establish the deep understanding at the core of their bond. Dawn approaches, yet Athena holds it back, extending their night of reconnection beyond normal limits. This divine manipulation of time emphasizes the cosmic significance of their bond. When they finally unite physically, it represents not mere desire's fulfillment, but the restoration of proper order in human and divine terms. With morning comes the awareness that challenges are not over. The families of slain suitors will seek vengeance, threatening civil strife in Ithaca. Odysseus must visit his aging father Laertes, who has retreated to a farm on the island's outskirts, living in self-imposed squalor as he mourns his missing son. Beyond immediate concerns lies Tiresias's prophecy. Odysseus must undertake another journey carrying an oar until he reaches people who mistake it for a winnowing fan. The reunion with Laertes provides another emotional climax. Odysseus finds his father digging around a fruit tree, dressed in patched clothing, hands calloused from labor, unbefitting his royal status. This self-imposed degradation, a physical manifestation of grief, moves Odysseus deeply. Yet once again, he approaches reunion through testing rather than revelation. He assumes one final false identity, claiming to be a stranger who once hosted Odysseus. This last deception proves too much for the old man. Hearing his son spoken of as absent, Laertes pours dust over his grey head in mourning. The sight breaks Odysseus's resolve. He embraces his father, declaring his true identity and offering proof through knowledge of the orchard, naming each tree given to him as a boy, a botanical catalogue of their shared past. Placing this scene after the suitor's slaughter and the emotional reunion with Penelope demonstrates the epic's expansive concept of homecoming. Odysseus's return is incomplete without reconnecting to his father, embodying both heritage and future. The moment unites three generations: Laertes, Odysseus, and Telemachus, who joins them at the farm. This continuity across time balances the disruption of 20 years of absence. Meanwhile, news of the suitors' deaths spreads through Ithaca. Grief and anger grip their families, who gather the bodies for funeral rites. Eupates, father of Antinous, emerges as a leader calling for vengeance. Despite counsels of moderates pointing out that the suitors brought destruction upon themselves, many arm themselves. The looming civil conflict threatens to taint Odysseus's triumph. As the vengeful party approaches Laertes' farm, the scene is set for a new cycle of violence, a blood feud recognized in Greek society as nearly inevitable after such killings. Here the gods intervene. Zeus and Athena confer on Olympus, concluding that enough blood has been shed. Athena descends as combat begins. After allowing minimal fighting, including a moment for the aged Laertes who kills Eupates with a spear, she halts the conflict with a thunderous command. Her divine authority, backed by Zeus's thunderbolt, compels both sides to lay down arms. This imposition of peace provides a definitive resolution to what could have become an endless cycle of revenge. Homer acknowledges that human societies left to themselves often cannot escape retaliation. Divine intervention represents the transcendent principle necessary to break the cycle, perhaps analogous to the later development of law and third-party justice replacing blood vengeance in Greek society. A formal pact is established between Odysseus and the suitors' families, with Athena disguised as mentor overseeing the oaths. This political resolution complements the domestic restoration achieved through reunions with Penelope and Laertes. Odysseus has reclaimed not only his household but his kingdom, not only his family roles but his social position. The epic concludes with peace restored to Ithaca, proper order re-established, and Odysseus fully reintegrated as husband, father, son, and king. This comprehensive restoration fulfills the promise of Nostos, the homecoming that has propelled the narrative from its very first lines. Yet Homer leaves us aware that Odysseus's story is not entirely complete. Tiresias's prophecy regarding the inland journey remains unfulfilled, a future obligation that will take the hero away from home once more. This unfinished business suggests that even the most perfect homecoming contains within it the seeds of future departure.
Odysseus, the man of many turns, may achieve stability but never stasis.
This open-ended quality distinguishes the Odyssey from tales of simple closure. Having explored the profound complexity of homecoming, its physical, emotional, social, and political dimensions, Homer acknowledges that no return can be absolute or permanent. Even as Odysseus reclaims his place at the center of concentric circles of connection, marriage, family, household, kingdom, the horizon of further journeys remains visible. In the tension between arrival and departure, between reunion and inevitable future separation, the epic finds its enduring resonance. We recognize in Odysseus's story not only the challenges of an ancient hero, but the universal human experience, seeking home while knowing its impermanence,
Valuing connection because we understand its fragility.
The final image of Athena establishing peace captures this delicate balance. Divine intervention produces a resolution that human effort alone could not achieve, yet it responds to human struggle rather than replaces it. The gods honor Odysseus's extraordinary perseverance by granting the peace his own actions could not secure, completing what he began through 2 decades of relentless effort to return. In this cooperation between mortal striving and divine grace, between human agency and cosmic order, the Odyssey finds its most profound meaning. Odysseus's journey, physical and spiritual, geographical and emotional, maps the full terrain of human experience against the backdrop of divine purpose. His homecoming becomes not merely a personal achievement, but a restoration of the proper relationship between mortal and immortal spheres, a rebalancing of a world disrupted by war, absence, and transgression. As we leave Odysseus finally at peace in Ithaca, recognized by all who matter to him, we understand why his story has endured for 3 millennia. In his determination to return, in his willingness to endure extraordinary hardship rather than surrender his identity, in his capacity to adapt without losing his essential self, we recognize the highest potential of human resilience. And in the joy of his homecoming, however hard won, however shadowed by past suffering and future obligation, we glimpse the profound reward that makes such resilience worthwhile, the irreplaceable experience of belonging, of being known, of finally coming home. With Odysseus restored to his throne and peace established in Ithaca, Homer's narrative reaches its formal conclusion. Yet the Odyssey itself begins a new journey through human culture. Like its resourceful hero, the epic travels across vast distances of time and space, adapting to new contexts while retaining its essential identity. The poem's influence began with its centrality to ancient Greek culture. Alongside the Iliad, it served as foundational text, simultaneously entertainment, moral guide, historical record, and religious reference. Children learned to read from Homer's lines. Public recitations united communities. Politicians quoted Homeric verses to bolster arguments. The epics provided a shared cultural language, uniting otherwise fractious Greek city-states. As Greek civilization expanded through Alexander's conquests and Roman adoption, Homer's reach extended accordingly. Romans translated, adapted, and referenced Homeric material extensively. Virgil, author of Rome's national epic, drew direct inspiration from both heroic poems, particularly in narrative structure and themes of fate and homecoming. This classical foundation ensured Homer's survival through the medieval period, when many ancient texts were lost. Although Western Europe's direct knowledge of Homer waned, the stories endured through Latin summaries and adaptations. Byzantine scholars preserved the original Greek texts, maintaining an unbroken tradition of Homeric scholarship in the Eastern Mediterranean. The Renaissance rediscovered Homer enthusiastically as part of its broader recovery of classical learning. Following Constantinople's fall in 1453, Greek manuscripts arrived in Western Europe, prompting new translations and commentaries. Homer became essential reading, influencing literature, art, and philosophy. Each era found its own reflection in the Odyssey. The Age of Exploration saw parallels between Odysseus and contemporary navigators encountering new worlds. The Romantic period emphasized the poem's emotional depth and sublime natural imagery. Victorian scholars debated the historical reality behind the myth. Modernist writers recognized in Odysseus's fragmented journey a metaphor for modern dislocations. James Joyce's Ulysses, published in 1922, represents perhaps the most ambitious literary response, mapping the Odyssey onto a single day in Dublin and highlighting both timeless homecoming themes and their relevance to ordinary life. This reimagining, neither direct adaptation nor mere imitation, demonstrates how deeply the Odyssey has embedded itself in Western literary consciousness. Beyond literature, the epic has influenced virtually every artistic medium. Painters, from ancient Greek vase artists to Renaissance masters to modern abstractionists, depicted Odyssey scenes. Composers created operas, symphonies, and song cycles inspired by its episodes. Sculptors captured moments from Odysseus's journey in stone and bronze. Filmmakers adapted the narrative directly or borrowed its structure for original stories. Its impact extends to psychology, philosophy, and politics. Psychoanalysts saw in Odysseus's journey a model for understanding the human mind, with external monsters representing internal struggles. Philosophers, from Aristotle to Heidegger, drew on the epic to explore identity, ethics, and human purpose. Political theorists examined its portrayal of leadership, community, and the balance between individual excellence and social responsibility. Even language bears Homer's imprint. Terms like siren song, between Scylla and Charybdis, and lotus eater have entered common usage, often without recognition of their Homeric origins. The concept of an Odyssey as a long, challenging journey has become a universal metaphor. What explains this extraordinary persistence? Why has this particular story, among countless ancient narratives, maintained such resonance across millennia? Perhaps it lies in the Odyssey's balance of opposites: adventure and homecoming, individualism and community, fantasy and realism, divine intervention and human agency. Unlike many heroic tales that focus solely on martial prowess or supernatural conflict, the Odyssey encompasses both the extraordinary and the everyday, both cosmic forces and intimate human relationships. Odysseus embodies this balance. He encounters gods and monsters, yet remains human in desire, flaw, and relationship. His defining quality, adaptability, makes him timeless, capable of translation into endlessly varied cultural contexts. He survives not through unchanging strength, but through perpetual transformation, an ideal protagonist for a world in constant flux. The poem's exploration of homecoming likewise transcends historical setting. The tension between wandering and return, between exploring the unknown and preserving connection to the familiar, represents a universal human dynamic. As civilization becomes increasingly mobile and boundaries fluid, the Odyssey's meditation on home gains relevance. Moreover, the epic's narrative sophistication, its complex temporal structure, perspective shifts, and blend of adventure, romance, and family drama rewards endless reinterpretation. Each generation emphasizes new aspects and applies new frameworks. Feminist readings explore Penelope's agency and household power dynamics. Post-colonial approaches examine portrayals of foreign lands from a Greek insider perspective. Psychological interpretations probe the inner dimensions of Odysseus's external challenges. This interpretive flexibility extends to translation. The Odyssey has been rendered in virtually every major world language, often in multiple versions reflecting differing understandings. Each translation interprets as much as it translates, emphasizing diverse aspects: oral origins, narrative drive, poetic imagery, or philosophical insight. In English, the tradition spans from George Chapman's vigorous Elizabethan version to Alexander Pope's elegant couplets. From Richmond Lattimore's scholarly precision to Robert Fitzgerald's mid-century modernism, from Robert Fagel's accessible dignity to Emily Wilson's contemporary narrative focus, each version becomes a new poem in dialogue with the original and its contemporary moment. This ongoing process ensures the Odyssey remains a living cultural force, not a static monument. Each era reads the poem differently, yet something essential persists, a core truth about human experience that transcends historical specificity. Perhaps this essence lies in its fundamental humanity. Even a hero favored by the gods must navigate universal challenges of identity, relationships, and mortality. Odysseus confronts supernatural dangers but also ordinary challenges, aging, family strain, and community conflict. His story acknowledges human vulnerability and resilience, our subjection to forces beyond our control, and our capacity for meaningful action within them. In an age of global mobility and technological change, when traditional notions of home, identity, and community are redefined, the Odyssey offers neither nostalgia for fixed origins nor uncritical embrace of perpetual wandering. It suggests meaningful identity requires movement and return, adaptation and continuity, individual excellence and social connection. This nuanced vision explains why the Odyssey continues to inspire scholarly and creative responses across cultures. Contemporary authors, from Derek Walcott in the Caribbean to Margaret Atwood in Canada, Nikos Kazantzakis in Greece to Ralph Ellison in America, have engaged its themes and structures, finding in Odysseus a figure addressing modern questions of displacement, belonging, and selfhood. The Odyssey endures not as a distant relic, but as a living dialogue partner in our ongoing cultural conversation. When we read, hear, or watch adaptations of this ancient story, we join one of humanity's longest continuous intellectual traditions, connecting across time and space with countless others who have found meaning in wandering and return. As we leave Odysseus at peace in Ithaca, we recognize that his journey, like the poem itself, contains seeds of further movement. Tiresias's prophecy points toward future travels. Ongoing translations and adaptations ensure its continual cultural voyage. The hero may finally rest, but his story sails onward, exploring the endless sea of human experience in all its terror and wonder, suffering and joy, complexity and beauty. Like Odysseus, we are caught between wandering and homecoming, between exploration and connection, between transformative experience and enduring identity. In this tension, the Odyssey finds its immortal resonance, speaking across 3,000 years with a voice that feels our own, telling a story that, despite its ancient strangeness, is fundamentally ours.